no problem. So well, first, Daniel, here, this is overwhelming. A bit on the shock now. With all of you able to read my notes. This is about duty and choice. So the first obvious question here is whether I came here out of duty or out of choice. And I still don't know. And the following question is of course, if each of you came out of duty or out of choice, or out of pressure, perhaps. And I still don't know, but we'll see as we progress, I guess, in our pressure. So, what I'd like to do really is to offer some reflections. Some of it might be nostalgia about how I got involved in some of the projects, and of course, think a bit about the future. And basically, I will focus only on two fields where I think which are really the fields in which I've been really most involved. And of course, the first one, the clearest one is turnout, my obsession. And the second one is electoral systems. And I'm trying to reflect about why I got involved in these two topics, why not others. And I still don't quite know. But I'll offer some thoughts about this first, and then think about, in each of the two fields, what should be done next, and what's the next kind of things one should do, and perhaps what things I should myself in terms of new research, because we always have come to get new ideas and new projects. So I'll start with turnout. How did I get involved in turnout? Why is it I'm so obsessed with turnout? I guess the answer, I think, was provided by Bob Young yesterday, because I'm a small boy from a small town. And I love simple acts, simple value-based acts. Very, very simple things that people have to decide, and these decisions tell a lot about what we are and the values that we cherish. I think that would be the simple answer to that question. And this is why as I've in fact told a few times to some of my students, in my next life I will study the choice of first names, or I will study the decision to have dinner at 7 or at 8 or at 6. These are things that I find personally fascinating and much more important than what, of course, Martial is doing, which is looking at the so-called economic crisis. I think this is much more important, and we have a lot more to say. The other reason why I'm interested in turnout is that it is a puzzle. It is a puzzle because, from a strict utilitarian perspective, people should abstain. And this is a paradox, this is a puzzle, and this is interesting, so we have to address that puzzle. So the implication here is that despite all the ambivalence that I have, all the hesitancy I have towards rational choice and the economic approach, I think it is crucial, important, and that should be the starting point. So that's the other thing I would argue, is that in all kinds of things, I think we should start with rational choice, even in spite of all its inadequacies. And so I want to make basically the case that economics should not be called discipline science. It is a very important science, and extremely limited, but extremely useful. So that's the other point I would like to make. So basically, the bottom line is that I'm interested in turnout because it is simple, value-based, and also because Bob Young didn't tell me it was crazy to study turnout. And I think I was thinking about the reason why I got involved is certainly some conversations that we had at Western, in different places, but at Western there was one conversation. And this means that one of the reasons why we got involved in things is that we meet people which we find fascinating and we want to work with them. And if they are interested in the topic, there must be something there. So that's the reason for the reasons about. But the second one is electoral system, and that's even more difficult. Honestly, I just don't know why I got so much interested in electoral systems. The only thing I know is that there is a factor here, and the factor is standing up and not listening right now, and it's Stéphane Dion. And so this is what I could remember is that Stéphane told me at one time that DIT and Al-Khali was organizing a conference on democratization, the impact of electoral systems, and that we should do a paper together. And that what I think the beginning of my second obsession with electoral systems. So it's an indication again that science is a social act, and then when there are people that you respect a lot, you find fascinating. If they are interested in it, you should join it. I mean, there must be something there, and you have to do it. So that's, I think, the reasons I got interested initially in these two systems. Now, the questions about turnout and then about electoral systems. What do we know? What else do we have to know? On turnout, my contribution is about duty. Since it's civic duty, we've talked a lot about this here. And I was trying to determine how I came to believe, because one of the few things I'm not unconvinced about is I'm trying to be as open as possible, but I think I would find it very difficult now to come to the conclusion that duty is not important. I have opened about the relative importance of duty, the importance of other factors, but I've become convinced that civic duty is extremely important. And I was trying to determine exactly how I came to that view. It's not clear to me, but certainly what sort of convinced me the most at the time was the array of different kind of evidence that always combine in the same direction. So it's both experimental, unstructured interview. I did some of the structured interviews at the time, qualitative interviews, the use of comparing countries, all kinds of evidence, always converging in some direction. So this is one of the things that I became convinced about, that civic duty is very important. It is also very convincing because now the second reason just arrived, and that's Suzanne, my wife. And there is only one thing I'm absolutely convinced in life is that the reason why Suzanne votes is duty. There is no doubt about that. And also, Chris Aiken's wife, Tina, we've had long discussions about what they were voting and so on, and we agreed pretty rapidly. And it's Tina's really, I think, that convinced Chris that I was right. And I also agreed to Tina that now we're working together. And Tina was very, very important in that decision. Now, but this is not a crucial fact. I mean, it's all the other evidence. I don't want to give the impression that this is based on this evidence, but it's in the same direction. So what remains to be done about duty? A lot, of course. A lot to better understand exactly how it works. One direction is understanding the sources of duty, where it comes from. And it seems to me that the most obvious place to look at is in the family. And this means that we need to go to a old-fashioned approach that Dick Neame practiced some time ago, which is looking at the impact of family in the socialization process. And this is interesting because it's a very interesting circle, because when I started my PhD program, my first initial idea of a dissertation was socialization. I abandoned socialization because I was convinced at the time that public policy was much more important, so I got into public policy, and I tried to link public policy to elections, and I thought it was a right move on my part, because socialization went down in terms of movement and so on, but now I have to recognize that socialization is important, and we need real good studies about how people form attitudes about their civic duty or not in in the family. And then I think it's important to see exactly how duty interact with other potential factors. One other factor which has not been mentioned here, and about which one of you has written quite a bit, and very interesting, not quite convincing, I think, when I'm looking at how particularly one person here, is habit. And that's interesting because it hasn't been raised here, but that's a sort of a line of where I think John and I disagree. John Aldrich, there's a very interesting stream of research about arguing that habit is important. And I would very much like to show that we are wrong. They might not be completely wrong. I think this is probably something, but I find it personally very difficult to believe that habit is so important for two reasons, I guess. Perhaps the main one is that it is irregular, and I find it very difficult to think that people form irregular habits and things that happen every once, every other year. That's it. And also that I always wonder whether there are also whether there is an habit of not voting, and the literature is pretty vague on this. But that's unfair criticism because John cannot respond to my thing. But I'm sort of here basically expressing my interest in a critical study that we'll do together, where we'll try to see whether beauty is really, as I argue, more important than habit. And of course, the other aspect is social pressure. Don has already raised that possibility, and clearly that's another question that I think we have to think seriously about. If there is social pressure, it's clearly because there is a public norm, and in a sense, duty is there already, and Don has recognized it. So that's okay for me. But at the same time, I must say that this is the kind of results that Don has produced is really challenging to me. I guess the perspective that I'm proposing. In the following sense, that if you really have a strong sense of duty, you should not be affected by social pressure. At least the way I've conceptualized it. So the big question is, whether the people who have a strong sense of duty are affected or not by pressure. And in fact, contrary to what Don suggested yesterday, I would expect the impact of duty or the impact of social pressure to be mostly among those without a sense of duty. Because those, if you have a strong sense of duty, you should vote automatically, or it's really not, that's not an habit, but it should really come to the conclusion you have to vote in an election. Unless you forget about it, or you don't hear, when it might become circumstantial evidence, but the impetus to vote should be very, very strong. So it will be very interesting to see what is the case exactly. But the relationship between social pressure and duty, I think, is a very important aspect. I am still very skeptical about whether pressure is so powerful a factor, not because of the results of the experiment. In fact, I find them very, very striking, very, very telling. But the question, which is a different question, is how much pressure are people exposed to in actual elections? It might be that pressure has a lot of impact, but it might not mean a lot if only 10% of the population are exposed to any kind of pressure. So in fact here is what I'm telling is that we need non-experimental data, observational data about the prevalence of pressure to see exactly how important a factor it is as well. And it's called for, again, a multi-method approach where you've got experimental but also observational data. Finally, I would argue that if we want to understand exactly what civic duty is about, we have to understand duty, other aspects of duty. Duty to recycle, duty of the public servant to represent the collective, the public interest. I think we have to understand, we have to get out of the electoral process and think about duty more generally speaking, and think about how it relates to other duties that we have. How different is civic duty compared to other things, and I think we haven't reflected at all on that aspect. Enough for duty. Let's move to electoral systems. What remains to be done here? In fact, I think this is pretty clear in my mind, and it's a shift. It's moving to a different question. I've worked a lot on electoral systems as such. I think the next focus should be on another aspect of electoral laws, and that's compulsory voting. Because of course that's a way to tie in my interest with duty. But there are countries in the world where, of course, voting is made compulsory, and that's extremely interesting. Now, what do we know about compulsory voting? There was a very interesting book by Sarah Birch, which sort of reviews the evidence. It clears that it works, that it increases turnout. I don't think we have any clue about how it does it. And so my claim here again is that what we need are descriptive studies, not experimental, not causal in any way, just descriptive information about how the system works. How many people know that voting is compulsory? Do they know about the fine? Do they know the probability that these fines will be enforced? And again, that's a call for more descriptive information. I think quite often we are moving too quickly to causal explanations. I think in many cases, in this case, I think we need to understand exactly how the system works. And here, of course, the obvious place to look at is Latin America. So Latin America is my next move. I want to study compulsory voting in Latin America because there's so much variation. There are countries with and without compulsory voting, countries where it is enforced, those not enforced. With Brazil, like it's compulsory only from it's free from 16 to 18, and compulsory until 70. Then it goes free again. So obviously, the next thing is to study how compulsory voting works. No theory, just simple, descriptive data about how it works. This is why, of course, I need to study Spanish, and I need to go to Barcelona, I'm sure, to study Spanish, so I'll spend some time in Barcelona before the last point about it's about methodology. It's more general reflections about methodology. Because I am a methodologist. That's so for me, my identity. I am a methodologist because, of course, my major exam was in methodology. So as some of the students there, so what's defined ourselves is the major field that we took. I think I have the distinct honor of being the only person who has a major in methodology at York University. So that's quite a success, I guess. In fact, at the time, I wrote a paper which is called Power and Causality, Quality and Quantity. This was my comprehensive exam. I'm always so keenly interested in methodology, but perhaps contrary to the present trend, I am interested in measuring things. So exactly how we measure sense of duty, how we measure strategic voting, how we measure psychological and mechanical effects of electoral system. Dick sort of mentioned this yesterday. One of the most stimulating experiences, intellectual experiences, was discussing with the members of Canadian election system, CES, Canadian Election Study, questions voting, how do we measure things. It was in 2 languages at the same time, in cramped rooms in hotels, and thinking very hard about exactly what we want to measure, what's the best way of measuring it. This was fascinating, awesome. The same thing with respect to sense of duty. Now, Chris and I, we have our duty and choice questions. So if you want to measure duty in any survey. We have our question. It must be on our website, I'm not sure. I have to clarify this with we're sending it over all the world. I think we have at least 20 countries now where it is being asked. This is how we should proceed. We have to think very seriously about exactly how we measure things. That's the most important thing of all. As methodologists, I also learned that the experimental design is the most rigorous scientific approach. I made one mistake early on, like hundreds of other colleagues. I came to the conclusion that the experimental approach was highly desirable, but not feasible in most cases. And that conventional wisdom was successfully challenged by Don Green. I think this was a major accomplishment. I was wrong. I think he overestimated probably the field where it can be used, but he was wrong in forcing us to think about how we should use the experimental approach. In our research, now I've been, of course, completely contaminated by Peter and Danielle, who followed Don and convinced me that the experimental approach is the way to proceed. And now all the new students who come in, and Danielle can testify, this was the very first questions I asked him when he came in as a new PhD student is, have you thought about doing an experiment? So that's part of the socialization. After I've, of course, explained the difference between percentage difference and percentage change and percentage change, which is, of course, in the chair. So I've been completely convinced by the importance of the experimental approach, but I want to end with two words of caution, because I'm always, of course, trying to go against the dominant approach. There are limits to the experimental approach, and I would like to see, I've mentioned two. The first one I've mentioned already is that we need good sound descriptions first and foremost. And my impression is that those who use the experimental approach often are so much concerned about endogeneity, about having it right in terms of the protocol and so on, and they don't pay enough attention to exactly how to measure things. And I think if we don't have a good measure, everything else is problematic. So that's the first concern I have, I guess, with those who are, and also who sort of insist on the experimental approach. The other, and also makes a huge difference if we don't know what's the frequency of the phenomenon. Again, if you're interested in civic duty, it makes a huge difference whether it's 30% or 60% of the people who have a sense of duty. It makes a huge difference. I think it makes also a difference in terms of social pressure. So we have to get good estimates of the frequency of the phenomena that we want to study. And so that's, I think, what is crucial. And there are, of course, a lot of areas where very simple descriptive data are extremely important. So my last wish with respect to this is that there be a new journal that will be devoted entirely to measures and descriptive information, and a complete ban on causality. And that we'll just have a top journal. So this means that perhaps I will have to sort of lobby for a new group at AFSA or PSA or whatever. I don't know exactly what the name of the group would be, but that would be a basic argument in favor of description before talking about causation. But we have to move to causation as well. Let's start with describing things properly. And that is it. Thank you.
before the reception officially begins, so we can keep clapping for 60 minutes.